Welcome to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories of addiction, grief, recovery, and courage. And also from people who work every day in the field of substance abuse who discuss their experiences and advice. I'm Mike Torville, your host. Thank you all for joining us. Hello, everyone, and thanks for spending time with us here at Healing Voices Project. We're glad to have you all back. You know, we frequently have guests on who share their stories, and every one of them has had a deep emotional effect on me. It's extremely courageous to step up and share your stories, to share regrets, shame, mistakes, or behavior that may have broken families or have had a devastating effect on other people. And it's another thing entirely to open up about a family loss, especially a child, if a child was lost to substance abuse. And so our visitor today is Katie Shea, who has a lot to share about her own experiences and also losing a son. So Katie Shea, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, and I know you've got a lot to talk about.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Sure. And I know you've got your own experiences with alcoholism. And by the way, what you're doing now, you're working with the Michael J. Diaz Foundation.
Yes.
Make sure we talk about that quite a bit.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's start with that real quick, and then we'll say what brought you there. So you spend your days at the Michael J. Diaz Foundation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, no, what it actually is after my son passed, I started up a GoFundMe page, and I was amazed and humbled by the amount of money that it actually generated, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to work with sober houses, because I know that like my son had a difficult time getting into sober houses and staying in sober houses. He was definitely a revolving door kind of addict, which many are, and it's tough when you've already gone through so many houses. People kind of don't want you because they see that. But anyway, I tried to get in touch with a couple of sober houses that didn't really respond to me, and then when I was in touch with the Michael J. Diaz house, they were overwhelmingly accepting. They welcomed me with open arms, and they said, whatever you want to do with this money, however you want to work it, is fine with us. And I'm trying to go toward the food. I'm trying to go nutrition, healthy habits. That's kind of my focus.
Yeah.
Because when my son was eating well and when he was exercising, that's when he was his strongest, in his mind as well, not just his body. So that's kind of where I want to put my focus on that.
So you've been involved with the program since last spring, or is that?
Nope. My son died in May.
In May of 2021.
Of 2021. And I found out, I came with them probably around the end of the summer, where we started talking.
Okay. Your son was Brandon.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Now, prior, and we're going to get into Brandon and what you went through with that, because it's not quite a year, obviously.
Right.
So, but prior to that, I know you had your own experiences, and you've been sober for 30 years, right?
I am.
That's wonderful. 30 years is it's another lifetime, which is great.
Right.
But prior to that, you went through drinking excessively, as you said, and there were times even when you were younger. Now, can you talk a little bit about how that started, how it evolved, and what got you to stop?
Well, when I was a kid, I kind of always felt kind of a little awkward, and going into teenage years, it always gets worse. Anything is exacerbated once you get into teenage years if it's negative, because
things become bigger problems than they really are.
Everything's a problem when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
And I started drinking when I was 15 and drink to excess every time, every single time.
No moderation there.
I
No,
never
no.
had a drink in my life. Never. It was always to black out, brown out, pass out, whatever. But once I started drinking, I felt like, well, I'm a little out of control, but now I'm not responsible.
Some of that awkwardness went away?
The awkwardness, I didn't care about that when I drank.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter. Because nothing mattered. I just felt like I could do whatever I wanted and it didn't matter. So, and I did that for a bunch of years and then, through high school, and I went into my first detox when I was 19.
Wow. What happened at detox?
It scared me, but not to the point of not drinking anymore. I drank again, and I would go through periods of time where I would stop for a little bit, but I just couldn't. I just didn't. At that point, I didn't know what it was like to not drink. Everything was revolved around drinking. If you go to the beach, you drink. If you go to the movies, you drink. If you go out to dinner, you drink. It doesn't matter what you do, you drink. And once you fall into those circles of people, you don't know how to get out. And it's not like anybody's bad, but that's just the way they live.
Yes.
Right?
And you find yourself really not associating with people who don't drink.
Correct. Because why would you want to do that? They don't want to drink, so what's wrong with them?
Right. So this went on for a while. Did you go into detox again or any rehabs? How did that go for the following years?
I don't know. Like back in the day, it didn't seem like there was a lot of those types of things.
As there are today.
There are today. Right. I did go into AA and I did go into the rooms and it kind of ruined my drinking as far as that goes.
It ruined your drinking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what AA does to you. It ruins your drinking because now you have a conscience.
It was easier without one?
They give you a conscience. They do.
Life is easier without a conscience, right?
Yeah. But they're very accepting, so every time you go out drinking and you come back, they're like, welcome back. It's like, okay, come on back in. Nobody's judgmental.
Yeah. And as you went through this, can you see, looking back, what worked or what didn't work? What components of that program made a difference?
Just being involved.
Okay.
They say, you got to jump in with both feet and not just tiptoe in. Because if you tiptoe in, you're going to just get pulled back out.
Yeah.
It's familiarity. You're familiar with those people that drink. But if you cross into AA, now you've got to be familiar with those people. And that's hard because alcoholics don't like change. We don't like to change.
Change is uncomfortable.
Change is uncomfortable.
Yeah. But you went on like this until you were how old?
Well, I got sober when I got sober when I was 27. I really don't think about that.
But you had a child.
I did.
And your child at that time was about a year and a half, and you were still drinking.
I was drinking, but it wasn't as bad as it was
as
before.
Excessive as
right.
before.
It was more like I would have like a binge drinking, and then I would go for a couple months, and then I would binge.
Mm-hmm. And so you had your child, and but there was an event, something you'd heard that hit you hard.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I hope I can get through it without.
We'll help you. We're
Thanks.
here. Yeah.
So I was in an AA meeting, and this girl started talking, and she started talking about her friend, and her friend had a child that was a year and a half old, and it was a boy, and her friend died of alcohol poisoning, or she choked, or whatever it was, however she died.
It was the result of alcohol.
It was the result of alcohol.
And this was when she was in her own apartment.
She was in her own apartment with her year and a half old son, and she died. And that child was in that room for several days with his mom's dead body. And I said, that will never happen to my son.
You, at the time, had a son the same age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon was a year and a half at that time.
And so that hit you like to use the ton of bricks, that knocked you over.
Oh, yeah, totally knocked me over. And I never drank again.
And you didn't.
No.
And that was in 1991.
One.
Yeah. Well, some things work and some things don't. That worked.
Right.
And sometimes the impact of those stories hit you harder than anything else. And this is partly why we're doing this, because sometimes the stories that reach out and you never know who's going to relate to it or have an effect on someone. So after that, you said that's not going to happen. My son, and he's a year and a half, and I can't imagine that ever happening. But you also had to think, I put myself in a position for that to happen.
Right.
Many times.
Many times.
So were you married at the time?
I was not.
Okay, so you were a single parent.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, more important that you knew the only person your son relies on is you at the time. So that was important. But how did you have anything else that supported you through your sobriety after that, or was it just you on your own?
No, my family was always there.
Yeah.
But they didn't know anything about any. I mean, nobody had like problems with alcohol, in my family, where you would go to AA.
Was this accepted, right?
And it was, it was like they didn't kind of understand why I had to go to AA. They're just like, just stop drinking. Just stop drinking.
Just say no. That's all there is to it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Which is,
right. Right. And so they understood to a point, but not, and they supported you.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
But did you go to any programs after that, or did you need to?
I did one rehab at one point in time. It was in Westfield. It was the old Quarry Hill.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did that, and that was very that was right before I got pregnant, that I went to Quarry Hill. And I learned a lot there.
Yeah.
So there was a little foundation there, but again, like AA, so that was a good thing that I did that. But again, it was, I think that was the only actual rehab that I went to. I went to a couple detoxes on State Street, when they had the detox up on the top floor of the hospital.
Okay.
I was at that once or twice. At some point.
So you did learn some of the foundations, and it helped you, obviously, knowing some of that. But after that, you just said, okay, I'm going to barrel through this because there's nothing that's ever going to happen
to my son.
Like to that story that you heard that hit you. So you stop drinking, you pull yourself out of that. You bringing up your son.
Well, I want to say that I still went to AA like every day.
Okay.
Like every day.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So you had ongoing support through AA.
Oh yeah, every day.
Yeah.
Every day for a couple of years.
Okay. So that helped.
Oh yeah. That was totally. If I didn't do that, I don't know if I would have been able to. But I just immersed myself in AA.
Okay.
Like I went every day. I went to meetings. I went to different kind of groups.
Yeah.
Speaking engagements here and there.
Okay. You immersed yourself, as you said.
I did.
Yeah, you were.
I did.
Okay. And as you went through that, and your son's growing up, and then later on, and kind of now sort of shift to your son's story, because as he became a teenager, how did he started getting involved with, was it drinking, or did it start off as drinking?
Well, he liked skateboarding.
Okay.
I guess there were a couple kids maybe there that liked to drink.
Yeah.
He wasn't really one of them. He did drink a little bit, but he got in trouble one time, and that was it for drinking. And he told me, he's like, I don't
It's just
I
not
don't
his
like
thing.
to be out of control.
Okay.
So that's where I thought, okay, so he didn't get that gene. We're good.
What changed?
Well, he moved in with his dad, and because he and I I was the overprotective parent, and he needed space and.
Anyway, he was a teenager,
right?
So,
right.
yeah,
It was a tough thing, and so we went through a lot, and so he ended up moving in with his dad, and we all thought that was probably the best choice at this point because, like I said, I was a little overbearing maybe, and probably. Yeah.
With good reason.
Yeah.
But okay, you're a parent,
Yeah. So, but then he started, his father worked nights. and he was doing well for a while, and he was saving up all kinds of money, and but he always had gastrointestinal issues. You know, he played baseball. He was an amazing baseball player. But he didn't want to play anymore because he always had stomach problems, you know. And he found someone that gave him some Percocet. And they're like, here, take this. It'll make you feel better.
Okay.
So he did. And he did.
And he kept taking them.
And he kept taking them because it was free at first, you know, and then, okay, now it's going to cost you. So now he's losing all of his money. And now he's getting into other things where he's selling things. And so he's getting into trouble. And the progression just, you know, went on. And I didn't know any of this because, you know, I didn't live with him.
Right.
And he started having breathing problems.
Where's that coming from?
Where is that coming from?
Yeah.
To the point where I remember one day he was in his car and he wouldn't unlock the door. And I'm screaming and he's like gasping for breath. And I'm like, what?
Did he have asthma or was there something you thought?
No, he had nothing like that.
So you had no idea?
I had no idea.
Okay.
And apparently when you snort cocaine or whatever, you can get it caught in your lungs.
Okay.
And that's where it started. Plus, heroin does that. It slows down your body, and then when you try to bring it back up again, I'm not sure of the medical portion of it, but he just started having more.
And at that time, though, you didn't know what's causing it because you had no idea he was using any kind of drugs.
None.
So
None.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after that incident, when did you find out? When did it hit you that he was using?
We were on the way to the doctor. I was taking him to Boston because I'm like, we're done. We're done. I'm taking you to Boston.
Yeah.
And so we went on the drive to Boston. That's when he fessed up, and he's like, Mom, I've used heroin. And I'm like, what? You know, me being an alcoholic, drinking, never in a million years thinking heroin.
Yeah.
What is that? That's a 1970s thing that.
Heroin right.
Right?
Yeah. And at the time, too, you had said that he said that he didn't want to ever be out of control. So this is hitting you like this doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for him to like really go through everything because of course you're ashamed and you're hiding things. And so by the time I found out everything and every single time I found something new, I'd have to go back and go, okay, so now what do I do? Because he would lie and he would steal and he would do all those things that was totally out of character for my child.
Right.
You know?
Right. Who is this?
Right.
Yeah. So did he go to rehab?
Well, see, and that's how that all went with rehabs, you know, detoxes. Oh, you can't go into a detox unless you're high. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I didn't have to do that, you know. But then I found out later it's because they won't give you the certain kind of drugs to help you detox.
Okay.
If you're not high. And you just sit there and you're miserable and you got to go to these different little meetings and this and that and you're just miserable. And plus, you already have the gastrointestinal problem
on top
and
of
it's
exacerbated
because
that's tough.
Yeah.
So that didn't work the way it should have.
I don't think that the detoxes work the way they should, but I mean, I'm coming from a mom's point of view. I'm not coming from the medical point of view.
Professional point of view, but yeah, that's
yeah.
So how did he kept using?
Yep.
Yeah.
He kept using and he couldn't stop and he, you know, at some point he probably should have been medicated. Don't know when that was, but we definitely missed the mark. And he went rehab and detox and rehab. So, you know, the one in Springfield, the one in Holyoke, the one in Worcester, you know, and then you go from the detox to the TSS, no, the CSS, and then from the CSS to the TSS, and then you're supposed to go to the 3/4 house, and then you're supposed to go to a sober house. And so there's a whole way to do this. But I don't know that.
Of course, and I was just going to say, no one could possibly know what that whole process is if it's first, especially if it's the first time you're going through it. You're just like, what happens now?
Right.
And then you're hearing all this confusing information, right? So you're obviously a little overwhelmed by this.
I was completely overwhelmed, and I had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And I just did what at the moment I thought was right. You know, because the bottom line is my child could die at any given moment. That was always in the back of my head.
Yeah.
You know, because overdose. You know, I went to a place and I got Narcan at one point because I'm like, I need to know how to use this.
Yeah.
And my father, who he stayed with my father for a while, got him, trained him. My father's 80 years old. Now he's got to train him how to use Narcan.
It's something so foreign to him, right?
Yeah.
And to you even,
Yeah.
but especially for him. Yeah, because you start to think about things that you thought previously were unthinkable. Like, why
Right.
would I ever have to think about
Right.
having to save my son's life and doing this? And as this went on, and again, we talk about this a lot here in the podcast, what people don't know, and that's why we're trying to share the information, because if somebody is encountering this for the first time, well, a couple things. Mistakes are made because they make some assumptions that are incorrect, or they go to the wrong resource and enable and all these things that make things worse rather than better. Learning it on the go is something that I'm sure if you look back, you probably look back and say, I should have done this instead of that.
Oh, every minute of every day.
Yeah, yeah. But at least now, and maybe there's somebody listening who's going through what you went through then, right? You can say, okay, well, what do I do? Now, looking back, and is there any glaring moment or something that happened that you wished you had done differently? I'm sure there's lots of them, but is there something that was the number one thing I wish I had known?
Oh, there's just so many.
So
I mean,
many.
I couldn't even put it into one because it's just so complex. And the only thing that I can say is I wish I had known all of it as soon as it started.
And I guess that's what I was getting to. The earlier you know it, the better, to
Right.
state the obvious. But the thing is, the sooner you know, and if the minute that somebody has even a suspicion or a thought or the beginnings of this, is to inform yourself as much as you can about all of it, as much as all of it means.
And you know,
right?
back
Yeah.
back at that point, things were different than they are now.
Yes.
So things are a lot different now.
Yes.
A lot in just several years. And the whole process has changed, and the way people look at things, although the stigma is still there, which is huge. I was never the person that said, not my son. I was the person that said, how could this happen, but not my son? Because it can happen to anybody, and it doesn't matter what kind of house you live in.
Of course.
You know, and at that, you know, a lot of people hide it at first because they don't want anybody to know their kid is doing
that's
heroin.
very common,
And I didn't
yeah.
care.
Yeah.
You know, he cared.
Of course.
He
Yeah,
cared.
well.
I didn't care because I was looking for answers, and I didn't care who I was asking. And he would get mad at me, and he's like, "Mom, stop telling people this stuff." And I'm like, "I need answers. You're not telling me what I need to know. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you're lying. I need to know because I can't help you unless I know."
Right. And how are you going to get the information? You can't rely on the person who's using for the
Right.
information,
Right.
obviously.
Right, because his ideas of what should happen are skewed.
Yeah.
Because he just wants to be out of pain. That's the bottom line.
What events brought you to May of last year?
May of 2020, I received a phone call from him after not hearing from him for a while, and he said, "Mom, I give up."
This is May of 2020.
May of 2020.
Uh-huh.
It was actually May 10th of 2020. First, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, "Where are you? I'm coming to get you." I went to get him, and I brought him to the Greenfield Detox. He's like, "I'm done. I'm done with this." I was thrilled. It was Mother's Day. So he went to detox. He went through the whole thing, went into a sober house. Everything was going great. He was getting healthy. He was eating right. He was doing all the right things. It was the most amazing summer. Everybody, else had a rotten 2020, but you know what?
He's back.
2020, I got
yeah.
my son back.
Yeah.
And we had conversations, and then he went skateboarding one day, and he fell, and he dislocated his elbow. Now, dislocating your elbow is not like dislocating your shoulder. I mean, you can pop that right back in a lot of times.
It's painful, but
It's
you
painful,
can do it.
but you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do it, and it's pretty straightforward. Your elbow is a different story.
Yeah.
Because your arm is just kind of
It's
dangling.
just right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he went to the hospital, and the hospital that he was not allowed to be in because he got high in the bathroom one day, he was redlined from that hospital. But he could be treated there.
But he couldn't stay.
But he couldn't be a visitor there.
Oh,
He could
I
not
see.
step foot in that hospital without being a patient.
I gotcha. Okay. All right.
They shot him up with fentanyl to reduce his elbow. That was the beginning of the end. This was the 1st of December in 2020. And he couldn't recover from that. He tried.
You brought it all right back.
It brought it all right back, and he got high again, back to the hospital, back and forth. He pulled it together for a couple months, but then he just couldn't keep it together. And then on May 9th, I talked to him on the phone, and I thought he sounded a little high, but I didn't know things that had happened previously, and had I known, I would have never let him be alone because he got high that day. He got high on heroin, and I didn't know that.
You couldn't tell.
Nope. I thought maybe he was taking some Percocet because I knew that he was going through stuff, and I thought maybe he had taken a pill, and I kept asking him, "Are you okay?" He's like, "No, Ma, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good." So, and I'm thinking what had happened is they gave him something in the hospital, or I don't know. I actually don't even know because I don't know. And then I called him the next morning to make sure that he was up for work, and there was no answer. And so I called his father, who lived a couple houses away, and at this point in time, because he was doing really well, up until December. And so his father went to the house, and he found him.
He found him, then he called you.
Yeah, well, he called me as soon as he got to the house and said, "I can't open the door. I'm calling the cops," and it was a nightmare. And then they got him in the ambulance, and the people at the ambulance wouldn't let me in because of stupid COVID. And I'm like, I don't really care. I don't care. Everybody get out of the ambulance. I don't care. It's my son.
Right.
And then they told me that they were going to one hospital. They went to another. It was just horrific. It was a horrific day all the way around.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, and all that you'd gone through, and then the ups where you thought he's back, and then you go back through the elbow injury.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing that, because there are people who are going through what you've gone through, and don't know where to go, and the dangers of injuries, and we hear this a lot, especially whether it's oxy, whether it's fentanyl, or any other painkiller. Believe me, there's so many things that could go wrong, and again, you couldn't have done anything.
No.
You can't look back and say, well, you just can't see what could have changed, honestly, because you know that these events just happened. And as you said earlier, somebody said, why don't you just stop? Just quit drinking. Well, you can't just say, just stop using the drugs. It doesn't work that way. And again, if others are listening, if you are, I think the thing that Katie said most often is getting the information early. The earlier, the better, and to intercept this.
Right, and don't deny what's going on.
Yeah.
Don't sugarcoat it. Just look for answers, and try to find places that are going to help you, like a sober house. And I'm not going to slam any sober houses, but there are sober houses that make money, and there are sober houses that care.
Yeah.
So you've got to find the ones that care.
And again, your association now with the
Yeah.
Michael J. Diaz
Yeah.
Foundation, and you found that that's one that stuck with
They
you.
care.
They stuck with you, and you stuck with them.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's the mdiasfoundation.org, correct? MDIAS?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I won't misspell that one. But MJDIAS foundation.org. So to learn more about it, and you're right, they have a fantastic reputation, and they have several sober houses, right?
They have, yes, they have two, and then they have another. Well, there's three, but two. That I'll let them explain.
Okay. All right, we'll get to that too. All right, well, I know we've got sort of running out of time, and again, Katie, I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Of course.
Hopefully, right, it'll help people, but I'm really appreciative of you spending time with us. So we'll be talking along the way, and everybody, thanks for joining us here. I hope this information was useful, and again, you can always contact us at healingvoicesproject.com. Thanks for listening, and thank you again, Katie. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right.